let's take an economist, Dr. Paul Alaje, who is sending in this question from Lagos.
Your Excellency, there is no economy without energy. Between 2016 to 2022, Nigerians are now paying more for energy. Even before Putin occupied Ukraine, the electricity significantly increased. The cost of PMS has also increased. What are you going to do to help Nigeria? In particular, President Obasanjo started intervention in power sector. Olusegun Obasanjo started intervention in power sector. President Yar'Adua, President Jonathan, and now President Buhari, they all have tried their bit, but power seems to be stubborn. How do you intend to overcome darkness in Nigeria and once and for all give Nigeria stable power supply? Are you going to cancel the existing contract with the DISCOs and GENCOs, or what exactly are you going to do to make industry produce more, to improve unemployment, and to make power available for homes for all Nigerians? Your Excellencies, in 2015, Your Excellencies, in
question, this power issue is at the center of our economy. We get it right, we get a lot of things right. I'd like you to tackle the issue of power. What would you do?
Well, let me reply what Paul said first. He said it's stubborn. I don't think the power is stubborn. It is the people who are trying to solve it that are not doing the right things. We're not the only country that have power problem. People have solved it everywhere. It's not this is not a rocket science. It's been done in several countries of the world. So why is our own different? Yes, there have been issues where we say that the privatization of the process which was started or completed did not go well, but we're not going to revisit or cancel existing positions. No. We're going to make it work. What do we need to do in power is to unbundle first the transmission line. Because today, we're actually generating up to 10,000. But the transmission line cannot carry that. Support the DISCO. We're going to support the GENCOs who are existing. Unbundle the transmission line. Support the DISCOs to make sure that at least whatever is produced is wheeled and distributed accordingly. That is the first thing you're going to do. And you have to do this strictly under a guideline properly supervised. Then you have to open up like South Africa has done. They have power issue like us. Even when there's 60 million and they're generating almost 40-something thousand, they declared emergency and said if anybody can generate up to 100 megawatts without license. If somebody who is 60 million generating 40-something thousand, almost 50,000, declare the emergency, we declare war here on power. And see how, if he will consume everybody, he will consume us. But we must get power.
You were in Egypt. What did you learn when you went there?
Of course, it's a very easy thing. Egypt did the same thing. Egypt had below about 20,000. They found that if from Arab Springs, one of their studies showed that power is a critical issue. Today, Egypt is generating almost 50,000. In fact, Egypt is exporting power to Europe. If these things can be done around us, South Africa, Egypt, why not Nigeria?
Practically, Mr. Obi, should you win this election in February, in practical terms, how much of power do you estimate that you'll be able to give Nigerians, say after 2 years of being in office?
Go and read my manifesto is there.
Can you tell Nigerians who have not read it?
It's committed. No, they need to be reading as well.
No, since you have the platform, you can as well
when I
tell them.
didn't present it, they said my manifesto is all they want. Now that I've presented, you should read it.
Now you have the opportunity. This is the people's town hall. It's for the people of Nigeria.
I said within 4 years, first 4 years, we'll be able to generate, distribute not less than 20,000. But I can tell you we're going to do far more than that. It's going to be war. We're not going to, like the vice presidential candidate have said, two of us are coming from a different, this is going to be a generational change. We are going to show Nigerians what they've never seen before.
Do you have something to say about the issue of power? Because I'm going to bring another interesting issue from the question from the second question from Paul Alaje.
Nigerians should not be afraid to spend if you're spending correctly and you're going to get value. And this is a national attitudinal revolution we have to adopt. If you scare your government to think that the moment you touch some economic fundamentals, you are going against the people, that economic doctrine has given way to value chain processes. I used to say that why buy fuel cheap and buy security more expensive? Nigerians, so long as the domestic demand that will be engendered from the injection of money by a new government that is able to save from waste, a new government that is able to engender investment, okay? So long as the marginal increase, after marginal increase, is going to bring you to a level that you are paying the realistic commercial level price for either energy or electricity, then Nigerians should develop this attitude of accepting and reasoning with their government. Because a government does not operate in vacuum. We need to let Nigerians know well ahead of time that this revolution coming, your understanding and your participation is it, actually. There is nothing that can be achieved without the willing participation of the people. And then the pricing is what matters. Economists, we have to understand the era has been changing. There was an era in which it was taken for granted that electricity must come cheap. Then to an era that government will now be adjusting it depending on, then to a level in which they have to pay the commercial rate. Now, what is the commercial rate? If the commercial rate is high, the country must be brave enough to pay it, because if the people use all sorts of arguments to refuse to pay, then you have a problem. It will not work, and government will have to continue to subsidize.
Let's listen to yet another question. This one, I guess, is on inflation from Dr. Alaje, the economist.
Your Excellencies, in 2015, when the incumbent administration began, exchange rate at official window was less than 200 naira, and at parallel market, it was around 400 naira. Today, exchange rate is worse off. We now have over 450 at official window and over 720 at parallel market. This has implication on inflation, it has implication on poverty, hunger, and deprivation. And more importantly, the Debt Management Office revealed around the first quarter of 2021 that over ₦1 trillion was added to our debt profile simply because the Central Bank of Nigeria devalued naira. If you were the president of Nigeria, how do you intend to help Nigeria with a stable exchange rate? What are the practical steps? What would you do so that the naira in Nigerians' pocket will not continue to go worse off?
All right.
Paul, and you know that the only thing that drives exchange rate is your reserve, and your reserve is as a function of your export. When you're not producing anything and you're not exporting anything, there's no way you can control that. You just have to move into production. I've given this example all over the place. You can't have a country like Nigeria with 200 million people living on 926,000 square kilometers of land. Our total export, Paul, you know, in 2021 is 18.9 trillion naira. If you use that the exchange rate on the average, 400 and 700, use 650 as the average pricing. It's about $30 billion annually if you have it. If you're able to get out the receipt, $30 billion for a huge country like this. Compares with Vietnam, half of our population at 100 million, living on 331,000 square kilometers, a third of our land. Their total export last year, or 2021, is over 350 billion. And they all manufactured and produced goods. We did, including oil, 30 billion. They did, including alone, 30-something billion. So we need to start producing and exporting. 2, oil, which ordinarily is your main source of foreign exchange income, is now being stolen. You are the only OPEC country, apart from Venezuela, that could not meet your quota because people in government are stealing the oil. So it is a mess. You need to deal with all this. Otherwise, go and look at what happened in Angola. Angola was able, because of Ukraine war and the oil price went up, Angola was able to bring down their inflation, bring down their rate of exchange. Go and see what they improved. It was almost twice what it is today in Angola. But because our own, we have not the oil to sell. What we sold was stolen and everything. And you have to control your financial rascality. What is inflation in Nigeria today? Paul, you know that. One is the biggest is food insecurity, which is fueled by insecurity. That's the biggest inflation we have today is food inflation. That is fueled by insecurity. Followed with the fact that you have a problem with your exchange rate because you are no longer getting oil receipts. And then, of course, the financial rascality, you're throwing money in an unproductive space. Look at your level of your money supply. It's about 4 times your productive supply. Your GDP grew in the last quarter of 2022 by 2.25%, but your money supply grew by 11%. So that means you're throwing more money in an unproductive sector. So we need to put production. We'll start solving that problem. Otherwise, you're going to have problem. And once you start doing it, you have to match these 2 rates. We must not continue this criminal rate of exchange.
Mr. Obi, the Manufacturers Association representative is in the room, but there is something I would like to clear, and this is a very quick one. There is a lot of blame game around on the issue of the fiscal part of the economy, the policies of the CBN. Who would you blame for that?
Well, I blame the fiscal side. You know, often at times we blame those who are working when we should blame those who are in charge. I had a situation in Nigeria that I say it very often. There was an agency in Nigeria that was, but this was about 20, 30 years ago. I was involved in a probe. They bought a house. This agency bought a property in United Kingdom. 400, that property is supposed to be 400,000 pounds. But this agency paid 2.4 million pounds. Because this is a property I know, and I knew where the environment, that there's no way a property can cost that much. Because, of course, it's not here that people can do anything. If you Google in London and say, property in this area, they showed me. So I decided I must see to the 8th. In the end, it was clear that there was a directive from a big man who told a young person to pay that price and said that that is the price. So the question became, should we sack this person who, obviously for fear of his job, was doing what the young man said, or do we deal with the big man? Everybody said we deal with you. I said, no, you can't deal with him. He was just merely obeying orders. And in Nigeria, when you don't know where the next thing will come from, you probably do certain things that you ordinarily not do when you know where the next meal will come from. And when I confronted the man, he told me, he said, as I thought this man is giving him this order, his wife was, this happened to him, and if he doesn't obey, they'll bundle him back, and then his children will stop going to school. So as far as it's concerned, even if he wants 10 times that, he will do it. So I'm not holding fault for doing the wrong thing, but let's go to the source. That's why that he said, if you don't do the wrong thing, those below will not do it.
So, I mean,
and I've done it in another.
So if you win the election, the CBN structure as it is today, would you leave it or would you do something about it?
Don't worry what I'll do. The rest assured that I'll do the right thing.
All right. Quickly, because the manufacturer association is...
I'm not giving a different position to Mr. President in waiting. I'm only adding. You said who would he blame? We should blame the head. We should blame the president. That's what His Excellency Peter Obi has been saying. Hold us responsible for anything that happens. In the first 16 years of this democracy, they had the patience to award contracts, even if they were inflated, and be following up and be collecting. Here come the last 8 years of our democracy. They were so pressed for 12 years while they were looking for power. So pressed that they had no time to wait for the contracts to be awarded, if it is roads or bridges. They just wanted cash the next day. That aggravated the actions in CBN. The very, very wide gap that the doctor, economist spoke about. That also informed quick cash, like when there was COVID palliatives, that cash of billions had to go and be changed, and you know this cash is not being given into, it's directly converted into cash. So there became an error. I said an error, I didn't say government too. I'm not criticizing anybody. There came an era in which they became more and more impatient for quick cash. That was responsible largely for the very sharp increase. Well, you know, like I always say, we've been keeping the records. After the first wave of COVID, when government tried to soften the sit at home, go and study how the dollar jumped from 365 to 485. Find out what happened in Zone 4. Find out what happened to the BDCs all around. These things are there for anybody to verify. In summary, we have suffered the consequences of some people's burning desire to get rich quickly, and the easiest way was manipulation of exchange rate, which already Mr. President in waiting has already said they are going to be merged. No brainer. No brainer.
All right.
Why should people go into risks and long-term investments to make a tiny percentage of what families and friends of the powers that be will make between Wednesday and Saturday, when the CBN gives out exchange rate? And these are people who came out to say that everybody who ruled in Nigeria before them was a thief. They came out to be greater, you know, in quotes, what they call others than those.
All right. Let's ask, a lot of people will be wondering, already thinking about what you said, what you do about the CBN, and maybe somehow that will spill out in the course of today's town hall. Let's listen to the representative of the Manufacturers Association.
Your Excellencies, Kayode Alonga is my name, representing the Manufacturer Association of Nigeria. I've listened with great excitement, times without number, the promise to move Nigeria largely from consumption to production. And I would like to ask a question about port infrastructure, efficient port infrastructure and services. There's a strategic relationship between port, import, and export. You have touched deeply on it tonight. With what we have today, a country of about 200 million population, with a far bigger economic potential than Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, Egypt, Morocco, we have, a port inefficiency that is crippling the performance of our economy. If elected president come 2023, what would you do differently to improve efficiency of our port infrastructure and services? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And you know that 20 years ago, the biggest port in terms of operation, the busiest, was Singapore. In 20 years, Singapore have moved from number 1 to about number 4 or 5 today. Because the port of Shanghai, other ports have come up, 3 have come up in China. Even Rotterdam, that used to be the biggest, the few have all gone. So these things change as quickly as possible. The reason why you still have the inefficiency kind is that people live off that inefficiency. We're going to remove them. There's nothing in it. Ports Authority is something I followed. Are you aware that Nigerian Ports Authority is the only port that I know in the world that have office outside its country of operation? They have office in London. They even have guest house in London. Can you believe it? For running a port in Nigeria. We're going to dismantle this confusion and get the country to work. That's what we're going to do. It's simple. There's nothing, it's not a rocket. I keep saying it's not a rocket science. It's been done. People have to do the right thing. Port is not difficult. Nigeria is lucky that we have ports all over the place. All these oceans you see are ports. What is happening to Ibom? What is happening to, look at the Port Harcourt ocean terminal that started by Shagari. See today, it's not functioning to how it should. Look at Warri. There's so many places everywhere in Nigeria is ports. And you cannot just open it up. But people deliberately don't want it to be opened up, because if it opens up, they won't have the confusion. And that's what is happening everywhere in Nigeria. They don't want to open up the economy where people's talent and hard work will match up the opportunity, because they will not have anything to steal.
How would you change it? What would you do specifically to turn that around, to change that scenario?
Easily bring private sector to build ports and manage it. That's what is happening everywhere in collaboration with the government. Singapore lives only off ports. I can tell you people who live off ports everywhere, except Nigeria.
All right. Gloria, hi.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Your Excellencies. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gloria Sien. I represent the Nigerian Union of Journalists. Sir, our question has to do with the issue of removal of fuel subsidy. Considering that this current administration has said that by June 2023, the subsidy will be removed, is it going to be your priority in your first 100 days in office? How sustainable is subsidy to the Nigerian economy? Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria.
Well, they have removed it. That's what they've done. But I can assure you, it will go immediately. Subsidy, I've said it before, is organized crime. And I cannot allow it to stay a day longer. What they're telling you is not what it is. Half of the subsidy that is being, what is being mentioned is not subsidy. First is that we consume the quantity that is not supposed to be consumed here. We are the same population with Pakistan. They consume below 50% of what we consume. So the first half, I will remove it and give those people who are drinking it water, because that's what they're supposed to drink, so we can save the money. 2, we will deal with the other remaining issue. We need the money today with our debts. We need the money to be able to invest in a critical social development issues. Look at this year's budget. This year's budget, education, which is the highest since this government came, is about 2 trillion. Health, which is the highest since this government came, is about 1.5 trillion. Then infrastructure, which is road and everything, is about 1 trillion. So these three critical development areas is receiving 4.5 trillion. Subsidies 3.6 trillion.
Six.
No, half year.
Okay.
Half year is 3.6. So if it's full year, it's about 7 trillion. Which country will invest more in subsidy than education and health and even roads? It doesn't make sense. This is the annual budget of education is 2 trillion. Annual budget of health is 1.5. Road infrastructure 1, and subsidy half year is 3.6. It will go immediately.
All right. Maybe this question, the vice presidential candidate will tackle it. Latasha Ngube is on the microphone. Latasha, hi.
Good evening, Your Excellency, Mr. Obi, Mr. Dati. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a lifestyle, entertainment, human interest writer and editor, as well as a socio-political analyst. Aside from my ever-growing concerns about the redistribution of wealth amongst the youths, job security, home ownership, and so on, I would like to focus on the one area Nigerian youths have distinguished themselves and promoted the country in spite of its many setbacks. The entertainment industry has grown in leaps and bounds, with many international players moving in to cash in on our talent and creating millions of dollars and taking it away. What plans do you have when you're elected, or if you are elected, to scale the industry, create structure, and bring in everything we can and build Nigerian youths? Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a very double barrel in every sense. Youth-oriented and the economy also.
Before I answer, let me once again appreciate the contribution of Nigerian youth in bringing Nigeria out to the world and actually adding so much value to our GDP. You see, the bedrock, education. If we raise the value, the quality of education that we give out, it will, from inside the industry, improve their work ethics and deliverables. The second thing is from the side of the economy. We have been speaking about boosting the disposable income of Nigerian families so that there's a little more room to consume on entertainment. I mean, to spend on entertainment. And that is a huge boost that we can give to the industry. The rest are all tied to what Mr. President in waiting and what we've been discussing here. Power, security, an economy with all requisite infrastructure. Then, of course, by the time we're able to pass that message out that security in Nigeria has drastically improved, we will move a step forward to link Nigerian movie industry, Nollywood, with international movie centers. And by the way, it has pained us a lot during this World Cup season to sit and watch without Nigeria. When African Cup comes up next, like I said I would do with ASU, I will again plead with Mr. President to whoever is in charge of sports and youth development, ensure that all is done. We move mountains to bring African Cup to Nigeria. There is no way World Cup will be played without Nigeria. Nigeria has passed that. It will never happen again, by the grace of God. This is entertainment. Sports is entertainment. And Nigerians, and then we're going to proliferate sports, its infrastructure, and the reward coming to the participants. Never will the salaries or allowances of Nigerian players be delayed by 1 hour. we will be there to ensure they are compensated and compensated over their own compensation. Link them with industries and companies, raise their profile internationally. These are part of what we'll do. Okay. Please, if I can just revisit the last question. There is a variety of ways that Nigeria is being shortchanged from what Mr. President has called, the scam is a crime. Time will permit me to mention only two. You see, when there is a Ponzi scam like the subsidy, a very, very small group of super rich who do not consume Nigeria, they don't consume Nigerian food or anything that adds value or brings the money back. They only they exchange the money. By exchanging that money, they are depressing the Naira, which is a loss. And I have argued that any further depreciation in Naira is a direct assault to our national security. Then it is depriving a key area like security. Just imagine injecting, for example, 6.3 trillion on security and not on a scam called subsidy. Just imagine what it will do. And whenever you speak about amounts, look at, for example, if you say 5 trillion is going to be spent under a system like ours, look at 5 trillion to be between 30 to 40 trillion. Because right now, the 5 trillion spent is giving you only 15 to 20% at best of the value of services and products and works that you're getting. Once, like I said again, group, personal, and political interests are removed, without increasing any amount, you have increased the value of what you are getting. So when you speak about 5 trillion now, you're speaking about 30 to 40 trillion during our own time.
All right. Let's wrap up quickly in just about 60 seconds on the economy, because we still have education, which I'm very, very passionate about. The issue of health is also there. And more importantly, women, the young people, and people living with disabilities, we must tackle those issues tonight. Quickly, Mr. Obi, if you want to touch on the issue of subsidy, what would you do with the money? Then also, if you become the next president, if you are elected in February, you will be inheriting a burden of about 77 trillion naira in debt. How would you resolve that?
Two things. Let me go to issue of fuel subsidy again. We have Dangote Refinery almost nearing completion. We will accelerate its completion. We have modular refineries today that have been completed. They can't even get crude. Can you believe it in Nigeria? That we have even modular refineries that are completed, they can't get crude. Something that is available all over the place. We are gas-rich country. We will encourage gas fuel vehicles and as well as, again, gas consumption in other areas where fuel is needed. Even people they say it's illegal refineries, we will bring them into legality by sitting down, because I said I'm going to talk with everybody. So if you're illegal, we will regularize their position, discuss with them, bring them into the purview of what is right. They become part of what is right. On issue of debt, I said before now several times, there's nothing wrong in borrowing. Every country of the world that I know and have studied is borrowing. But it is what you borrow for that makes the difference. When you borrow for production, it works. When you borrow for consumption, you have a crisis. The crisis we face today shows that we borrowed for consumption. And because of it, we did not see the growth in the value. In 2015, our cumulative debt was about 15 trillion. Today, it's about 75. So we've grown it's grown 5 times the size. So it's now from 15 to 75, we're talking about 400% increase. In 2015, our GDP was over $500 billion. In fact, our per capita in 2015 was 2,550. Today, after we have borrowed 400 times, which means our per capita should have been about 1,000 now, but it's 2,000. So what happened to the money we borrowed? It's a very simple thing. If that money was properly invested, there's nothing wrong. How are you going to manage it when you come into office? Because there's a huge debt. We've now moved to where we're owing less than 20% of our GDP to almost 50%. Because if it's 77, at 410, if you add a little, we're going to have $200 billion of debt with a GDP of 450%. What are you going to do? First is that you stop all borrowing. Every borrowing now will be for investment. Two is to discuss with the lenders on how you can now stretch the borrowing to be able to pay and be able to continue growing the country. Leave financing for me. I will know how to handle it. It's my sector. I'm a trader. So I will deal with it. But nobody will ever borrow again if you're not borrowing for investment. There's nothing wrong in borrowing. And we'll then start saving. You see, people talking about, they have said it, every candidate have said, I'm stingy. They didn't know that investment and saving is development. That's how you develop. The biggest debtor in the world today, in terms of country that are developed, is Japan. Japan is owing over 230% of their GDP. But Japan is the highest holder of US Treasury. Here is that what they borrowed is consumed, nothing saved. So we entered one chance.